Chapter 109. 4. The mysterious old man. The old man saw their doubtful looks and continued to say, although they still retain their human shells, they have long become people who are doomed and would die soon. That is because the very foundation the afterlife loft is constructed upon was once a mass grave many years ago, with many countless bodies buried deep underneath. By right that should not have affected anything, but as the people in the afterlife loft create just too much chaos, the aura of evil malevolence accumulated over a long period gets absorbed into the corpses, which then causes evil spirits to spawn, fighting to absorb the evil aura of greed and sin that would make them grow in power. Hence all that there is up there now is only just a bunch of mindless walking zombies immersed in their ultimate paradise. The atmosphere immediately fell heavily silent. No wonder those people had seemed so weird, the expression on their faces looking so abnormal. It was because they had lost their mind. Bai Ziyan shook his head and said with a sigh, that brat has quite a good head for business on his shoulders, but his ethics and sense of morals isn't that well managed. He has really harmed quite a great number of people here this time. I must get him to close this place down when I go back to let all the departed souls rest in peace, so that they will not come out to haunt people again. Senior, the reason I came here this time is because I need. Mulai had just opened her mouth to clarify her intentions when the old man smiled and stopped her from continuing on before his weathered thin hand slowly pulled out a small thumbnail-sized pill. This is a condensed essence elixir refined from the spirit essence from the ghost tribe. I think this will be helpful to you. Mulai stared, her eyes wide with surprise as she carefully accepted the pill, and then said highly gratefully, thank you, Senior. No thanks needed. You should not stay here in this place for long. It's better that all of you depart speedily. It seems like you do not want us to remain in here. Lu Junyao said, his mouth suddenly curling up into an amused smile, his violet eyes looking at the short-statured old man with a meaningful gaze. The living should not tarry too long in this place, as they might become tainted by the ghostly aura and fall severely ill, and there is no cure for that. The old man explained. Are you then saying that you're dead? Lu Junyao then asked. Every single exorcist is a dead person, or how would they be able to hold down the countless thousands of evil spirits? The old man took a long sigh and slowly turned his body away from them. The black mist around his body departed together with him, and from that indistinct figure, it could almost be seen under the coarse hemp garment that he did not have legs. From the moment he appeared, he had been floating. Qing Yu suddenly asked in a soft voice, who are you? Not knowing the reason why, she just could not help but feel the old man's gaze when he looked at her had been highly loving and very gentle, like he was seeing another person through her. I am a person who is all filled with sin and lives in the deep depths of darkness. The old and wizened voice sounded out from very far away, rippling out in circles. But now I have no more regrets. So many years have passed in a flash and Qing Er's little Qing has grown up so much already. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Qing Yu's irises widened and her voice raised up. What did you say? Do you know me? The old man clearly knew who she was, and knew that her surname was Qing. Qing Er's little Qing. She is little Qing then Qing Er. Must surely be her mother. Chapter 110. 1. Protecting oneself for the sake of everybody, but the figure of the old man was already gradually disappearing away. Qing Yu went speedily forward in pursuit, but the ground suddenly shook and collapsed, splitting into two halves that cut off her way forward. Qing Yu barely managed to steady herself at the edge, her face terrifyingly dark, and the aura around her body was highly oppressive. She just remained in her half-crouched position at the edge of the split, staring down into the 1,000-foot-deep chasm, without saying a word. Mulai was a little worried. This was the first time that she was seeing Qing Yu looking like that. The exquisite features on her countenance, without a single hint of a smile, but only an impending brutal storm approaching from the hills, sending a chill right through her. When a person who is always smiling suddenly turns his face grim and stern, it is really more frightening. Qing Yu, are you all right? Mulai asked in a soft voice, carefully holding her hand. From behind, Lu Junyao strode over slowly, his long slender arm stretching out to pull the young lady back up, and a little further back from the edge. What did that person just say that made you react so strongly? Qing Yu's dark eyes then slowly regained their focus bit by bit. She blinked her eyes and then massaged her temples as she replied, "It's nothing. Maybe I was mistaken with what I heard." Lu Junyao was not letting her muddle through it like that, and he said slowly in response. He clearly knew something, and that was what you have always wanted to know about. That's enough. Qing Yu's gaze turned a little chilly. I will handle my own affairs myself. Actually, she had initially not been that curious about the secrets of this body she occupied, but too many suspicious points had turned up that was bothering her, and hence she could help but need to seek a clearer picture. But this was after all a personal affair, and it concerned the mystery of her birth, so she did not want too many people to know about it. I can help you. Lu Junyao saw her demeanor suddenly turning stiff, and his brows pinched up slightly in displeasure. This little fox changes faces faster than you can flip a book. When smiling gently, she's just a puddle of water. When she turns cold, that water freezes into a sharp blade that can pierce right into your heart. Hearing what he said, Qing Yu lowered her eyes. Thank you, but there's no need. She then turned her head towards Bai Jiyan and the gray-robed man. I am grateful for what the two of you have done today. I will send 100 superior-grade elixirs over one of these days as a token of my appreciation. Once she finished, she then took her leave with Mulai. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Although she did not know why Qing Yu had suddenly turned to become so cold, but Mulai was still worried for her. She nodded her thanks to the men, and then followed Qing Yu to leave. Does that little lass have to be so calculative with everything? It didn't take us that much effort at all, and she has to be like this. Bai Jiyan said as he shook his head helplessly, thinking it was going to be really hard for them to coax her into going to cloud heaven with them. But why did her demeanor change all of a sudden? What did that old man say just before he left? Qing'er? Bai Jiyan rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Could it have something to do with the last birth? Isn't she a daughter born from a concubine in the Duke's manor? What kind of a secret could there be behind her birth? The gray-robed man asked, his face baffled. Are you stupid? Bai Jiyan rolled his eyes mournfully at him. How do you think she compares with any other young lass back in cloud heaven? Let's not mention anything else first. Did you even see that elixir fire of hers? It's a lot stronger than my own elixir fire. Just how great do you think the feng shui is here in the lower realms, that it is able to produce such a maniacal specimen? Chapter 110. 2. Protecting oneself for the sake of everybody. There are only two possibilities. Either she is an old and haggard demoness with heaven-defying cultivation reborn into another body, or she came from an extraordinary family background, where her parents were peerless experts, and she inherited their talents from them. Hearing that, the gray-robed man nodded his head like it had just dawned upon him. Could it then mean that the last parents might even be people from cloud heaven? Bai Jiyan snorted disdainfully. I suspected that from the first time I saw her, all right? If that's not the case, and it was known that just a little lass from the lower realms was actually higher skilled than him in medicine, then how would he, as the young lord of the divine healers sect, then still have the cheek to show himself? Yawn. The gray-robed man let out a sleepy yawn. It has been a long night, and I'm tired to the bone. Let's go back and get some good sleep. Let's go, Junyao. Bai Jiyan said to the one beside him, and then suddenly felt that something was not right. Why has that fella suddenly gone quiet the moment the lass left? Is he angry? Bai Jiyan cast his glance over warily, but saw that the man's fine and intricate features on his handsome countenance were tinged a scarlet red, which caused that always cold and distant face to somehow look even more dazzling. Are you all right? Bai Jiyan went a few steps closer. Just as he was going to check what was wrong with the man, he came to feel a wave of heat exuding out from the man. Bai Jiyan peach blossom-like eyes immediately flared wide. Why is your body so hot? Lu Junyao's violet eyes narrowed slightly, and he stretched out his right hand. On his palm, there was a thin and long wound. It wasn't deep, but blood could be seen. The gray-robed man's eyes widened in shock as well, the dozing bug driven right out of him in an instant. You're wounded. Heavens! Where did the wound come from? He must not be blamed for being so surprised as having served that man for several hundred years. Nothing has ever lived the moment the man lashed out. Not to mention injuring him. No one had been able to harm a single hair on him at all. So although it was just a thin sliver of blood to be seen, it was shocking enough already. Shut up. Seeing the gray-robed man kicking up such a big fuss over it, Bai Ziyan could not help but to whip out a leg to kick the guy. Are you such a stupid pig? Do you still need to ask? His body is so hot, and anyone would be able to tell that he got the wound from that flaming red ghost earlier at one glance. Having suddenly gotten kicked and admonished, the gray-robed man then asked in a weak voice, looking all aggrieved. Wasn't the Lord completely fine all this time? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ew, and that lass had even checked him earlier. Are you brainless? If that lass finds out, she'll feel that she owes us something, and become even more distant from us. How could Junyao possibly let her know? Bai Ziyan continued to berate him. The gray-robed man almost felt like there was no point living anymore. Why must he be branded as stupid and brainless? Just what did he do wrong? Bai Ziyan turned his head around after admonishing him, and his good-looking face creased up with concern. How could you allow yourself to be hurt? Don't you know that your body is special, and you cannot get wounded? What will you do if you get infected? How worrying. Bai Ziyan and Lu Junyao grew up together from a very young age, and they had been together for the longest time. Although he always suffered the stinging lash of Lu Junyao's venomous tongue, he was always the one who was most concerned for Lu Junyao, because no one else knew Lu Junyao better than he did, and knew that this man had suffered more than enough pain already. Chapter 110. 3. Protecting oneself for the sake of everybody. Lu Junyao looked at Bai Ziyan staring so mournfully at the wound on his palm, and he laughed softly to say, It's just such a small wound. Do you need to make such a face? What? The divine healer sect's young lord's medical skills seems to be slackening. TSK, who is in the mood to joke with you? Bai Ziyan could not cheer himself up at all. This small wound might be enough to cause you a whole barrel of agony, scratched by the flaming red ghost, and you still think it's nothing. You would have gotten off lightly if your fever just for an entire day and night. Bai Ziyan was furious as he spoke, and he suddenly stopped abruptly. His beautiful eyes peach blossom-like eyes narrowed, and he then said in a soft voice, Junyao, I'm serious. Do not do this again next time. What? Lu Junyao arched up an eyebrow in surprise, not knowing what he meant by those words. At that time, you could have dodged completely and kept yourself safe, couldn't you? But to ensure that the last does not come to any harm, your actions came to be delayed, and you opened yourself up to the risk of being bitten by the flaming red ghost, right? Bai Ziyan's enchantingly handsome countenance did not show his usual playful and frivolous expression, but was stern and serious. That lass is indeed rather highly skilled, and holds quite more than a few mysterious trump cards hidden in her hands. I agree that it will be great for us if she's on our side when she matures and grows in power in future. But you do not have to do so much for her, to the extent that you risk your venerable self to do it. You are the king of the dark regions, and it is only when you're safe and well that the dark regions can grow in might, where the disciples of the Dark Legion are firm in their faith and resolve. That would make the Dark Legion the most powerful might in Cloud Heaven one day. So for the sake of everyone in the dark regions, you have to protect yourself. It can be said that Lu Junyao had really been so completely indulged by everyone in the dark regions that he paid absolutely no regard to law and order, and was willfully impudent. No matter what he said or did, all those people recklessly followed behind him, acknowledging him without question. Even when the man had erratic mood swings and vented his frustrations on his subordinates when he was in a bad mood, not a single one among them uttered a single word of complaint, to the extent where as long as it made him happy, it did not matter even if they were flogged 100 times. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He could be said to be a man who truly possessed a mystical kind of attraction that made people willingly lay down their lives for him from deep down inside their hearts, as when he was truly happy from the bottom of his heart. Just the slightest rise in the arc of his lips was enough for all of them to give up everything they had. Even when Bai Ziyan had just been very young, He had been enthralled by just one statement from the young Lu Junyao. When you're around, I do not feel like I'm alone. And it was just that one single statement that made Bai Ziyan choose to single-mindedly remain by his side. Lu Junyao was just too lonely, so lonely that he did not know how to be sad or sorrowful, and did not know how to cry. That pair of violet eyes were always smiling, seemingly sparkling with stars inside. He smiled when he was angry, he smiled when he was sad, and he smiled when he was filled with sorrow. Even when he went personally to exterminate the entire clan of the enemy who murdered his parents, and he killed the enemy's wailing little baby, who was just a few months old, with his own 2 hands, he had still been smiling. He held the baby's fragile neck, where from a loud clear wailing till the tiny face gradually turned greenish-purple, before the baby finally stopped breathing. Lu Junyao had seemingly been talking to himself, his words so saddening and devoid of hope. Chapter 110. For protecting oneself for the sake of everybody, he said. Why are you able to cry so freely but I can't? He said. Why are you able to wail in sorrow when you see your parents die a violent death, but I can't? He said. Why do I have to live an existence like I'm the devil smiling that gazes upon all that happens in the world, unable to laugh without restraint, unable to cry with unbridled sorrow? He said. Why do I have to be such a heartless, cold-blooded and tearless person, destined from the moment I was born to be a lone orphan star, where no one could come close to? Countless questions came out from his mouth, but among all the scattered corpses that filled the floor, none could give him an answer. Finally, he suddenly lowered his head and laughed softly to himself, saying like he had completely lost his mind. If that is what fate has destined it to be, then I can only defy what blind heaven has ordained. Ever since then, the king of the dark regions became an entity that no one did not know about. His personality haughty, where people who did his bidding would thrive, and anyone who defied him would not live. Everyone had kept their distance away from him back then, their faces changing the moment they heard his name. That was the reigning demon lord in cloud heaven, who possessed highly powerful cultivation, his exact whereabouts mysterious and unfathomable. He also had a bunch of fiercely loyal and incredibly powerful henchmen doing his bidding, a truly awe-inspiring existence. He terrorized cloud heaven with impudence for close to 500 years, and it might have been because some people were no longer able to put up with him any longer that drove them to join hands against the demonic lord. It was also because he had been too arrogant at that time which led him to fall for their ploy. And from then onwards, Lu Junyao began to withdraw into himself in restraint, no longer as spirited and willful, turning to become exceptionally steady. His heart also grew a lot stronger in the process, where no one, nor was there anything that could move his heart anymore, which made Bai Ziyan, who had always been beside him, a lot less worried. But right before him now, he had discovered that things had taken a bad turn. A variable had suddenly appeared, and it was a variable that was able to affect his emotional state, to the extent that this very variable had made him breach his own principle, to do so many things that his current self should not be doing. Lu Junyao looked at Bai Ziyan's worried expression, and he opened his mouth to say, feeling rather amused, I know that you are concerned about me and I am touched, but you should not think too much into it, as this is merely an accident, and it's just a tiny scratch. It's nothing. Junyao, do not try to do anything for that lass anymore. Although she saved your life, but you have saved her as well. It is just as she said before you're even. Lu Junyao was a little surprised. Didn't you have quite a good impression of her? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. That is an entirely separate matter. Bai Ziyan said stern-faced. If my admiration of her will cause you to risk getting hurt, then I will willingly abandon that kind of an admiration. Lu Junyao's gaze darkened, and he did not say anything more. And the inconspicuous gray-robed man, who had remained at the side to listen for so long, then suddenly spoke up. I'll say something, but the two of you must not be angry. The 2 men turned to look at him, like they were curious what kind of infuriating thing could he possibly bring up. I had always felt. Bai Ziyan, have you actually adored the Lord for many years? The gray-robed man had contemplated on it for quite a long while, before he came to give voice to that audacious statement, that could very well get him silenced. Chapter 111. 1. Snowball and a little lump of coal by Ji Yin was dumbfounded. Haha, he wasn't angry. Really. But just only wanted to pluck that fella's head off his shoulders and see just what kind of ridiculous nonsense filled up the inside of that fella's head. Because everything had happened all in one night. So Qing Bei had not been aware that Qing Yu had gone out at all, thinking that she had been in the tranquil abode all that time. Mulai had bid her farewells and left as she needed to bring the spirit essence elixir back to treat her father's injuries. Moreover, someone had been too audacious with their actions this time, and she needed to go back to do a little housekeeping, to deal with those sly and scheming traitors. Otherwise, the Mu family clan that had stood strong over the generations would be brought down by these scoundrels one day. Before she left, she and Qing Yu came to an agreement to go to the Faint Mist sect together when the time came. Till the time of the Faint Mist sect's recruitment of new disciples was still 4 months away, and in this period, nothing much happened. And on another side, situated deep within layer upon layer of mountains and valleys, sat a majestic structure in a most mysterious place. That was the almost legendary assassination temple within Carefree Valley. Within a quietly elegant bamboo loft, a man was dressed in his snow-white inner robe as he stood handsomely by the window. His waist-length dark hair was draped carelessly over his back, lifting and falling gently under the slight breeze. A few kingfishers were perched on the window ledge, pecking at the bird food scattered there, highly tame and seemingly not afraid of humans. Looking from the side, the man's exquisite facial features seemed to be gilded with a layer of radiance. His long, sharp brows slender, eyes elegant with long curled lashes that cast tiny shadows over his half-closed eyes. Just below that was his high arched and pointed nose, a set of light pinkish lips with chiseled jaws that with a handsome cleft in the middle of his chin. Just by looking at the side of that face, it was already enough for many conceited pretty young ladies to feel inferior and drab. "John, you're awake so early?" A man's warm and robust voice rang out. The person who just came in was of a towering stature, large eyes and thick luscious brows and handsome looking. It was Feng Qi. "Looks like you've almost fully recovered. You really scared us back then, although your very vitality was severely injured at that time. But it seems your cultivation has increased tremendously after recovery. Truly a blessing from the heavens upon the fortunate." Feng Qi said jokingly. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Hearing that the man moved and turned his body around, with his entire face revealed before people, one just cannot help but stare. For no other reason than this. Just below the corner of his left eye was a highly lifelike looking black bloom, tinier than a fingernail, but was just so eye-catching, its unique shape clearly visible. The man's countenance was already so outstanding that it was like that of a fallen immortal, and the black bloom, when his eyes were fully opened, just made the man look indescribably devilish looking. To think that a person was able to combine the unsullied aura of a deity together with a devilish air so perfectly, not contradicting each other at all. Chapter 111. 2. Snowball and a little lump of coal. If one were to see this almost deity-like young master for the first time, nobody would be able to link him to the ruthless assassin who killed people without even blinking. But the man was a killer through and through, and one who was known as the one and only divine-level assassin of legend throughout the lands. Shi Zhanchen's looks were just too alluring, so beautiful-looking he made people's hearts crumble. It was even rumored that in order to catch a glimpse of him, or to be able to speak to him, there were people who paid a handsome fortune to have him come kill them, with absolutely no regrets, even if they paid for it with their very own lives. Hence, there were very few people who truly saw his face. Besides people from the assassination temple itself, there were only dead ones. Even among the people from the Carefree Valley, very few have seen him before. It was because this man was just too special. Except for the nights when he went out on his missions, he would otherwise not take a single step out from that bamboo house. Shi Zhanchen walked away from the window and picked up the outer robe beside him to put it on. "You need something?" Feng Qi rubbed his nose and said, "The valley chief sent word over a few days ago that if you are feeling better, He wants you to go take a look at their recent progress and training. It will be the time we will recruit new disciples in a few months' time, and they must not be allowed to slacken in their cultivation training. And in just a few days after that, it will be time for the disciple exchange program between the Carefree Valley and the Faint Mist sect. The Valley Chief wants you to bring a few good saplings over, and also to spy on the Faint Mist sect a little. Shi Zhanshan listened quietly till he finished, and then emotionlessly threw out 2 heartless words. Not going. He just knew it would end up like this. Can you give me a reason? So that I can at least answer to the Valley Chief. Feng Qi said helplessly. Troublesome. Don't feel like going. Shi Zhanshan said. To him, all these affairs were completely meaningless. If he were to expend all that effort, he would rather accept a few more big missions which would pay several tens of million. Feng Qi sighed helplessly. All right, then I'll have to go play the bad guy. After he said that, he then remembered something and said, oh right. Something seemed to have happened in the Mu family, but Mu Lai did not make any request for assistance, and hence we did not interfere. But this debt owed must definitely be repaid, or it would remain a cause for concern to us in future. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He had been in a coma from his injuries, and was not aware of anything that had happened. Fortunately, Yi Xian had constantly come stick to him to nag at him, telling him about all the dangerous things that had occurred. Yi Xian had told Shi Zhanshan that he had very nearly been turned into a puddle of blood, and that the man almost would not have been able to see him again among other things. But one thing Shi Zhanshan remembered from Yi Xian's ramblings was that the person who saved him in the end was not the eldest miss of the Mu family, but a beautiful young lady in a white dress that they had never seen before. It had seemed like she was Mu Lai's friend, and it had looked like they were rather close. But as they did not know her identity, and neither had she left them her name, they did not have any more news about the girl after that, so they had delivered the repayment to the Mu family. It was said that the young lady was highly mysterious, and she had immediately broken the snake voodoo curse the moment she appeared. He was told the way she had dispelled the curse was even more astounding, completely brutal but executed in the most direct and effective manner. Chapter 111. 3. Snowball and a little lump of coal. Shi Zhanshan suddenly recalled what he had been told, and he asked in a casual tone. About that young lady in white, is there any news about her? Feng Qi was a little startled as it was the first time that Shi Zhanshan was actually asking about someone he did not know at all, but Feng Qi went on to answer truthfully. Nothing concrete, but it is said that she was someone Mu Qi went to invite in from the Green Wave Kingdom, so she should be the young miss of some family clan or noble family. That kind of presence, and the way she carried herself was not like that of an ordinary person. Shi Zhanshan acknowledged curtly, and did not ask any further, turning to walk out of the bamboo house. Where are you going? Feng Qi inquired curiously. Just going to the Valley Chief's to have a look. Shi Zhanshan answered without even turning his head. Feng Qi could not help but laugh in speechlessness. This fella just has a sharp tongue, but just a softy at heart after all. Ever since Qing Yu brought back that unbearably adorable little beast, Little Snow had become exceptionally obedient. That fella who always disappeared for 10 days to a fortnight at a stretch had suddenly just decided to stick to Qing Yu's side, following her wherever she went, like a sticker plaster. How could Qing Yu not know what Little Snow was thinking? That fellow was just afraid that its position was at risk, and that it would soon be neglected. As it had to share half the elixirs with another beast from then onwards, the sense of crisis could not be any stronger. Meanwhile, Meatball had been extremely obedient, and usually did not go running around on its own. When Qing Yu was occupied with cultivating elixirs, the tiny beast would just sit quietly on the table, its face cradled in its 2 tiny paws, its 2 beautiful blue eyes studying her actions intently, looking so adorable it could melt people's hearts. Unlike Little Snow, who would occasionally still be up to mischief, sneakily eating up a few elixirs. Meatball, come over here so I can stroke you a bit. Qingbei opened his mouth to say invitingly. Qing Yu had not hidden the truth from him, telling him that Meatball was a little creature she had found the night she went out to search for food in Hades Canyon, and that it could talk. Qingbei had been shocked for a good while, but he would naturally help keep that fact a secret. Hence, in the eyes of outsiders, the little creature was just a highly adorable pet of some unknown species. Even as a young man, Qingbei could not resist the little fella's charms. He just could not help it. The little creature was just too cute and lovable. Even if it was just sitting there and not moving an inch, people just could not take their eyes of it. The little beast was just too beautiful looking. The little fella, who was single-mindedly focused on watching its mother cultivate elixirs, suddenly heard someone call out its name. Its tiny ears flicked slightly, and it turned its head around. It then wrinkled up its small little nose in displeasure, and refused mercilessly. Don't want. Qingyu looked highly hurt. Why? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ew, because I belong to Mother. Only Mother can touch me. Meatball said with a serious look on its face. Also, boys and girls should keep their distance from intimate contact. I am a pure and chaste girl, so if you touch me, then I would lose my chastity. Qingbei's face was looking utterly flabbergasted. Pure and chaste girl? Did I hear that right? Spirit beasts have evolved to such an advanced stage. Not only can this one talk, but is even preaching about morals. Although Qingyu was in the midst of cultivating elixirs, she did not seal 5 basic senses, and so, she was able to hear their conversation. But the moment she heard what Meatball said, her meditative trance almost cracked, which would have ruined the entire cauldron of elixirs. Chapter 111. For Snowball and a little lump of coal. That little fella is just priceless. Waiting till Qingyu finished cultivating the elixirs, and kept them away, Meatball immediately leapt off the table, and came pattering over on its tiny paws. Its tiny face looking exceptionally pitiful while that pair of clear eyes just looked straight at her. Qingyu smiled and bent down to pick up the little lump of coal into her arms, and rubbed its soft and fluffy little head. That's right, a lump of coal. It was only after Qingyu brought it back that she came to discover that the little fella took on 2 different colors between night and day. At night, it was a pure white ball of snow, and it would turn into a lump of coal once daylight came. It was not known what kind of species it was that allowed it to change in color, but both shades were equally just as adorable. The lump of coal snuggled in Qingyu's arms, and after it found a comfortable position it did not move anymore, seeming to enjoy the feeling of being embraced by her. Qingbei looked on with envy, not knowing why the little fella just did not want to be carried by him. He knew he had been very nice to it, and had even often fed it things to eat. Looking at the youth's mournful expression, Qingyu could not help but laugh out loud and say to him, "It might be because it just hasn't gotten used to you yet, and seeks only for familiar faces. It will probably be better after more time passes." "Then why does it call you mother?" Qingbei then asked in incomprehension. "I remember reading in a book that when beasts are born, they recognize the first person they see as their closest kin. Could you have been the first person this little one saw?" Qingyu arched up an eyebrow, and stroked the ears of the little lump of coal. "Although it is small in size, it does not seem like it was just born. And I don't remember having ever seen it before in the past, or I would surely remember something so adorable, wouldn't I?" Unexpectedly, her voice had just fallen when she suddenly felt the body of the tiny creature stiffen up, and it then seemed to be sobbing spasmodically, whimpering in a soft voice. "Mother told a lie. You've clearly forgotten all about Meatball." That pitiful and aggrieved voice caused Qingyu's heart to soften, and she said in a gentle and comforting voice, all right, take it that I have forgotten. You're really just like a human child that loves to cry so much. But Meatball is a little child." The little beast lifted his tearful eyes to peer up at her, serious yet bashful. "I'm Mother's little child." Qingyu was speechless. The little fella is doing it again, acting all cute and adorable to but her heart. That was pure cheating. Pfft. Qingbei burst out in amused laughter, and went on to tease the little beast. "Why don't you tell me just how capable my sister is to be able to give birth to a little fella like you? And what about your father? Where did your father go?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingyu was utterly speechless. Her brother is arguing with a spirit beast. Really? Hearing that, Meatball pouted indignantly. Meatball does not have a father. Oh, such a poor little thing. So adorable, and you don't have a father? Qingbei exclaimed in mock surprise. Meatball is born from mother. What does it have anything to do with father? Sensing that Qingbei was making fun of him, Meatball growled angrily. Qingbei was stumped. How did you come to be born without a father, you foolish little child? Chapter 112. 1. He does not belong here. It was a daily norm between this pair of man and beast, which drove people to laugh till they teared. After Qingyu finished cultivating the elixirs, before her spirit energies had completely dispersed, her consciousness delved right into the dimensional space. Mistress, sensing the presence of her aura, Zhongmai materialized before her, his gold and silver eyes looking at her in surprise. Qingyu acknowledged with a nod and then asked, "Why aren't you sleeping?" It was not strange for her to be asking that, as when this fella's spirit soul had been incomplete, he was always sleeping most of the time due to weakness. Hearing that, Zhongmai was a little embarrassed, and he scratched his head while he answered, "I am working very hard on raising my cultivation level every single day now, seeking to catch up to Mistress' footsteps." His spirit had been damaged for so many long years after all, so there were many things that he had to start afresh. "I see that you have gotten better at apple polishing," Qingyu said as she smiled at him. She then turned her attention away from him and raised her slender hand to wave through the air. An enormous book that was about half a man's height then appeared before her, which let out a dull thud when it fell to the floor. Upon that old and ancient cover were imprinted with several complicated-looking ancient characters, heavenly insights of medicine. Throughout her past and present lives, the number of times Qingyu had flipped through this book could be counted from the number of fingers on her hands. On one hand, it was due to her photographic memory, where she was able to remember things just by seeing them once and to decipher and understand the essence from it. On the other hand, it was because there were medical and poison techniques depicted in there that were beyond her abilities, and before she attains a certain level in her cultivation, it was impossible for her to access the content further back in the book. But over the recent period, it was probably due to a change in her state of mind that allowed her to further break through to a small extent, that came to unlock another 3 to 4 pages of the heavenly insights of medicine for her. If this was in her past life, such a tiny breakthrough achieved would not even be worth a mention, but to Qingyu in her current weak state, it was already a great improvement. It must be known that after having descended into this strange world for so many years, she had only managed to unlock about 10 pages in the heavenly insights of medicine, such a thick tome that held more than 1,000 pages, and she was only able to access this half of its contents. Zhongmai was watching her, and he then said delightedly, "Mistress, your cultivation has advanced quite a bit again." There wasn't a ripple of emotion on Qingyu's face as she said indifferently, "It's still too slow." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Zhongmai said comfortingly in a soft voice. This body cannot be compared to Mistress' body in the past life with too great a disparity in so many areas. For you to have gained such a great improvement, the results are considered to be rather good. Qingyu let out a sigh. So many years have passed. Her body from her past life would have long become fertilizer to the plants and flowers. And with this current body, though not entirely all that gifted, but it could be considered to be one of the better ones, with very outstanding looks at least, so there wasn't much that she wasn't all that displeased about. Chapter 112. 2. He does not belong here. Seeing Qingyu with her eyes lowered as she perused those few new pages, Zhongmai asked curiously, what could have made Mistress suddenly think of checking through the heavenly insights of medicine? Qingyu's face was a little thoughtful as she said, over the past few days, strange images kept appearing in my mind which made me feel rather disturbed, so I thought that I should come have a look to see if I can find any elixir recipe with great mind-calming effects to soothe my mind. Strange images? Qingyu nodded, the aura around her body feeling depressed and decrepit, a feeling she had never felt before. Every time I feel like I am about to have an idea what they are, the images would suddenly just disappear abruptly, and the moment I close my eyes, I would unconsciously fall straight into my dreams. but I would not be able to remember a thing when I wake up. For a person who was able to go without sleep for days and nights on end, she was feeling that she had become quite haggard being tormented like this. Zhang Mai was rather taken aback for a moment before he asked warily, "Did mistress happen to see the scene from Azura's hell that appeared before?" Qing Yu was startled by that question, and although she wasn't able to recall too clearly, that scene had left such a deep impression on her it was hard to forget it. "It feels like I did. Mistress, do you still remember what I said about the source of that scene from Azura's hell? Just before a peerless expert dies, a dimension that forms from his powerful consciousness." "That's right. Normally when such a situation occurs, there is only one possibility." "What?" "The owner of that dimension is calling out to you." Qing Yu was a little shocked and she asked, "Isn't that a dimension that forms only after the expert dies?" Zhang Mai's face was serious as he replied, "But this is the only explanation that makes sense. Otherwise, why are you seeing that scene so frequently?" Qing Yu was silent for a moment before she said in a slightly hoarse voice, "I feel that it might have something to do with my identity and birth. The woman whom she could not see clearly might very possibly be her mother." This was not some wild and hazardous guess she made, but an instinctive reaction from deep inside her. The moment she saw that woman, she had immediately felt a subtle feeling inside guiding her to approach closer. That was the guiding hand from one's instincts towards their closest kin. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. That place. A familiar wave of stinging pain washed over Qing Yu's mind suddenly, that caused her face to turn pale in an instant. It is happening again. Every time she tries hard to think about that, her mind would always hurt intolerably for no reason, like it was trying to stop her from remembering her past. The beautiful alluring phoenix-like eyes immediately turned dark, filling up with chilling ice. Stopping her from remembering? It will not be long before she will definitely uncover the person behind this. Chapter 112. 3. He does not belong here. Water Edge Kingdom. It had been more than 2 months since the Duke of Vast Seas had returned, and the most unfathomable thing that happened within this period of time was just one thing. Although he possessed unparalleled intelligence, he was born sickly and frail. The Emperor, predicted to be unable to live past 30 years of age, had seemingly undergone an earth-moving change. Because of his frail health, Wuxia could not expose himself to strong winds in case he catches a cold, and was unable to undertake long and arduous journeys, or a single unforeseen change in the turn of events might rob him of his very life. But in the past 2 months, his vigor and vitality seemed to be improving by the day, and the man who was not even able to hold morning court for too long, was now able to last for an entire hour, was like a miracle to them. What astounded the whole bunch of officials was that they had even seen His Majesty practicing with a sword one bright and early morning. Wuxia's level of cultivation was not that low, but because of how weak his body was, he was unable to carry out any strenuous activity at all, not to mention practicing martial arts. For them to see His Majesty picking up a sword once again, it caused hot tears to brim up in the eyes of the officials. With the heavens' blessing, His Majesty's health was finally taking a turn for the better, and they would not have to worry about his well-being all the time anymore. And for that change, everyone credited it all onto the mysterious and powerful Duke of Vast Seas. Regardless whether it was 10 years ago or now, every time he appeared, a miracle seemed to happen, turning things completely around to finally bring a fortuitous conclusion to matters at hand. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. This man was seen as the Water Edge Kingdom's star of fortune, and as long as this man was around, the Water Edge Kingdom would never decline. Wuxia was dressed in simple and normal clothes. The flexible sword he wielded in his hands smooth as a dragon swimming in water, moving efficiently and with precision. His eyes were clear and sharp, the attendants standing at the sides who were initially filled with trepidation, now looking very much at ease, watching the man's actions without worry. The man's gentle and elegant countenance did not show the slightest bit of exhaustion, and his cheeks were tinged with rosiness, seemingly filled with vigor. At the very last instant, Wuxia suddenly paused in his actions a moment, and turned his flexible sword towards a particular direction, driving it straight into the tree standing 10 meters away. The loud sound of wood splitting then rang out, and the tree broke into two parts down the middle. Behind the tree stood a pretty and slender-figured young girl with a large pair of vividly enchanting blue eyes who stood there in a stunned daze. It was a good while before she recovered her senses, and she planted her hands on her tiny waist to admonish in an indignant voice. "My imperial brother! Are you trying to murder your own sister here? Aren't you afraid that the sword might hurt me?" Wuxia sighed helplessly and said, "Who asked you to hide yourself there without even making a single sound? Your imperial brother thought that it was some petty thief that sneaked in. Moreover, your imperial brother has just only one precious little sister that I couldn't dote on enough. How could I possibly bear to hurt you at all?" Chapter 112. 4. He does not belong here. Those words had not only explained the reason for his actions, but also soothed the ruffled fur of his younger sister, killing two birds with one stone. Wuxia had always been an extremely smart person. Hearing those words, no matter how unhappy Wuxia was, the anger just seeped out from her, as she came running over delightedly to hold Wuxia's arm, her face joyous as she looked at him to say, "My royal brother, I'm really so happy for you. If you come to grow tired of holding court one of these days, and want to sneak off for some relaxation, I can bring you out to play. There are many fun places out there, and you can just get Big Brother Yili to shoulder the load for a few days, and help to handle court for you. He doesn't like to go outside anyway." Upon saying that, Wuxia stiffened her lips to stifle a smile, seeming to think the plan she just came up with was really smart. Wuxia was instead taken aback. Let Qing Yili hold court and handle the state's affairs? He would have really liked to do as what Yin said. If this little lass who liked Qing Yili so much were to know that he was going to leave, she would probably be so sad and burst out in tears. Though she seemed to be such a carefree lass with a wild character, the people she cared about were Qing Yili and Wuxia, the two people who watched her grow up from young, her closest kin whom she had lived with for more than 10 years. So how was he going to break the news to Yin that Qing Yili would be leaving the water edge in a few months' time? In fact, not to mention only Wuxia would not be able to accept it when the time came, as even when he had heard that news himself, it had been a good while before he came back to his senses. That man was determined to leave. Logically, he had unwittingly came to save Qing Yili's life back then, and Qing Yili had stayed here in the Water Edge Kingdom for more than a decade for him, suppressing the chaos in the palace, and pushing him up to ascend to the throne. He had also grown and developed the might of the Water Edge Kingdom, paying back by more than 100 times for having saved his life. But Wuxia knew deep down inside that the man Qing Yili did not belong to the Water Edge Kingdom, and never had he been. He had made that clear when they first met. He was waiting for someone, and if he failed to locate the person, he would forever remain the Water Edge Kingdom to support its reign. But if he came to find that person, he would follow that person to his death. To him, that person was his entire life. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Maybe it was mere affinity between the Water Edge Kingdom and that man, but not fated to be. The Heaven's End Palace was Qing Yili's residence. It was a sprawling palace that was no less luxurious than the emperor's chambers. In that vast place, besides Qing Yili, there was only Ajin and 2 other servants, highly empty and vacant. But all this time, Qing Yili particularly loved living under that quiet tranquility that was almost deadly silence, with no one to disturb him. He had a cold and distant personality, and could very well not speak a single word throughout the day, like the winter ice upon mountain peaks that would not melt over thousands of years, even under the scorching rays of the fiery sun. A chill forever exuded from his body. Chapter 113. 1. Dream from the past life. Most of the time, he was immersed in his dreams, as in those dreams, there was the past that he missed. The girl possessed a pair of smiling eyes. Like all forms of sadness, and worries were unable to stand within them at all. And she always called out sweetly to him, as little Yi. Despite the fact that she was stopped from getting close to him, who had been of low and humble status, In those nights during the winter, when everyone was fast asleep, his door would always been silently pushed open. The young lady's slender nimble figure would come sneaking in, scuttling without a thought right onto his bed. When those cold tiny hands snuck under the warm covers, he would be awoken, and she would just look innocently at him with those beautiful eyes, looking so pitiful and feeble. She would then say in a soft and endearing voice, "Little ye, I am cold." He did not want to see her always getting punished because of him, and hence his attitude towards her was always cold and distant. He always told her that a man and a woman should keep their distance to avoid unnecessary gossip. At that time, they were just about 12 or 13 years old, an age that was prone to wild recklessness. He was always a person that was more mature and steady than children his age, while she was a lively and often mischievous girl, just like a carefree little princess. As a direct descendant of the family bloodline, and one who was gifted with high intelligence and a strong grasp of things, she was well liked by the elders and senior generation, who doted on her very much, treating just like they would a little princess. But this little princess was different from others. She had a very lively and sunny personality, but did not have any close friends. The person she was closest to was that youth that was found in the snow and brought back to the house. To what extent did she like him till? Not only did she give him a name, he even bestowed upon him a surname that was the same as her own. Just how high an honor was that? It was said just how many good deeds had the youth done in his past life to be so fortunate now to have won the little princess' favor. And only he himself knew that all this time, she had been the one coming to stick to him. She did not have parents from birth. It was heard that her father was betrayed while out on a mission and fell into an ambush. Her father had fought with his life, clearing a pathway with his blood to help his fellow clan members flee, but finally died from his injuries that had been too severe. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Her mother had been very near her term for the birth, and when she heard the news, she fell into a dead faint. And because of the trauma she suffered, she went into early labor, and it was probably due to the sorrow knotted up in her heart that she was in labor for an entire day and night, but she still had not given birth to the baby. When the baby was finally born, leaving her utterly drained and completely exhausted, her mother was found to be no longer breathing. She was brought up by her paternal grandfather. It was not known why she grew up exceptionally optimistic despite her pitiful past. She did not cry when she was born, but was laughing, a phenomenon that had never been seen before. A baby that laughed at the moment of her birth. He had asked her why she was always laughing, and wasn't that very tiring? Chapter 113. 2. Dream from the past life. Her expression congealed for an instant, and her voice was very light as she said, "I'm tired, but what can I do? For everyone else, they have their parents protecting them, but I only have myself to rely on. If I am not strong and do not stand out from all the others, I will not be able to attract their attention. For an orphan girl who has no one else to depend on, in this family clan filled with so much malicious scheming and plotting, there wouldn't be any of my bones left by now. She could be hurt, and she could cry, but no one would pity her if she was like that." So before the man who harbored rapacious designs in his heart appeared, Qing Tianlin, whose heart was filled with an insatiable ambition, people just needed to treat her a little bit nicer to make her let down her guard against them. Moreover, Qing Tianlin appeared as her elder brother, who showered her with endless concern and indulged her, which caused her to not think of guarding against him at all. When she came to see Qing Tianlin's true face in the end, an immense change came over her completely, her personality turning to become entirely different. She was always laughing and smiling before, and she became a person who seemed to wear a mask over her face all the time, making it impossible to read her emotion at any moment in time. Ever since then, she became prickly and cold, emotionless and merciless, her heart seemingly hardened, and it had no place for anyone in there. Her relationship with Qing Yili had slowly grown distant as well, probably because she did not want to believe in anyone anymore, afraid that she'll be hurt. But that did not matter. This time, it would be his turn to stay by her side to protect her, and not allow anyone to harm her. The scene then changed. From a young girl that was about 10 years old, She had transformed into a mature and alluring woman. She turned herself around slowly and smiled faintly at him. However, a trickle of red blood flowed down from a raised corner of her lips, which stained his vision blood red. Before she fell to the ground, he caught her in a tight embrace, his body shaking uncontrollably. He had never felt so frightened before, as that faint smile from her just now seemed to be her bidding her final goodbye. "I'm so tired." Her voice was so light that it seemed the slightest breeze would blow it far away, but it struck so clearly onto his heart. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU don't not try to speak anymore. I will get someone to save you. Don't be afraid. You'll be fine. He did not know how he managed to say so many words. It was the first time that he who had always been a man of few words had his indifferent eyes filled with panic. The long fingers kept wiping away the blood that surged out from the side of the woman's mouth. But the more he wiped away, the more blood there was. The bright red blood stained his entire palm, and stained the clothes on him a bright red as well. "Damn it! Why can't I stop the bleeding? Why?" The man's frantic eyes were red, a heart-rending helplessness upon his face. "Stop flowing already, I beg you. What must I do to save you?" "Little Yi." The woman's ice-cold slender fingers clasped the side of his face, seemingly with slight tender regret. "Foolish child, what are you crying for? A man does not shed tears easily." Chapter 113. 3. Dream from the past life. His tears fell upon her neck, hot and scalding. But she had not known that he would lose his calm just because of her, to shed such precious tears. That this man who did not even know how to smile would one day actually cry. "Little Yi, I am suddenly regretting bringing you back," the woman said as she looked straight into his eyes. After that statement came out, the expression on his face froze. "If I had not brought you back here, you might have been able to live a life without worry. Ever since you came to follow me by my side, you've suffered so much. And after I die, it is not known what those people would do to you. I really cannot help worrying for you." He then growled like a trapped beast. "You will not die. You cannot die. Even if you are in hell, I will be with you. No matter where you are, I will find you." He held her tightly in his arms, like his mind was about to break. "You said that you will never abandon me. You lied. You're a liar. Promise me that you'll live well." "I don't want that." Behind layer upon layer of curtains, a hand with clear distinct joints reached out, a hand long and slender with smooth fair skin. The man slowly sat himself up in bed, his dark green eyes like those of a wild beast still tinged with a slight blur from having just awoken. As the fogginess cleared and faded away, a bottomless bone-piercing chill could then be seen within the eyes. Ever since he met with Qingyu, he had seldom come to be haunted by these nightmares. But today, and it was this same dream. Could it be an ominous sign? His feet bare and wearing just his thin black inner robe, he stepped onto the icy cold floor, his thick luxurious silver hair a stark contrast against his black clothes, a dreamily beautiful sight. His emotionless gaze fell upon the tall tree outside. A lot of its leaves had been blown off its branches by the wind. It was already autumn. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It would be this season that he would be able to see his girl again, and never will they part again. But the dream that had come so suddenly caused him to feel perplexed and uneasy once again. Was something about to happen that concerned little Yu's safety? The flurry of falling leaves was like an old man with death looming near, his remaining life hanging precariously, that was about to come to an end. Fallen leaves returning to its roots, to await a new life in the next year. The green beastly eyes suddenly surged up tempestuously, every inch of the aura around his entire body freezing up into ice. The fallen leaves started to harden up in a blink, where the leaves falling down through the air froze, before they even reached the ground. The sun's ray shone upon them, scintillating into multicolored light, beautiful and breathtaking. But in the very next instant, all of that broke and shattered, turning into tiny crushed ice crystals, to disappear into nothing. Chapter 113. 4. Dream from the past life. New life. He would not allow that person to have a chance at a new life. Moreover, on the other side, because of some special reason, Whenever he got wounded, it was hard for Lu Junyao to recover from it. Hence, the people beside him took exceptional care of his body. Don't need to mention him getting a tiny wound from a scratch. Even if he was to accidentally knock or bump into something, someone would always be there ready to take the brunt of it for him. One could well imagine just how revered that man's body was to all these people. After they came back from the underground lair, although that tiny and negligible scratch had been carefully treated by Bai Jiyan, the fever had burned his entire body for one whole night, and it was till noon the next day that the fever subsided. Bai Jiyan had been frantic with worry, and did not sleep the entire night, afraid that something might happen to that fella, refusing to leave the room a single step, even when a subordinate came in to take over his shift, to watch over Lu Junyao throughout the night. Bai Jiyan's heart was so weighed down with worry about Lu Junyao's condition, that he did not even notice the conflicted and concerned gaze the gray-robed man was looking at him with. A conclusion coming to take root in the gray-robed man's heart. That fella Bai Jiyan has indeed been harboring covetous thoughts towards the Lord, and it seems the feelings were rather deep. After the fever subsided, and seeing the man on the bed was looking rather weak, Bai Jiyan said with his face creased up in impatience, "You listen to me good now. Anything that has to do with that lass, you are not allowed to stick your hands into it in future. Do you hear me? She might have saved your life, but how many times have you helped her both openly and in secret? I don't think she knows that you were wrecked so badly with fever here. Do you think she will feel guilty about it at all?" The man knitted up his brows slightly in displeasure, and then said in a lazy offhand manner, "It's just a fever. What are you getting so uptight about? You say it's just a fever?" Bai Jiyan's peach blossom-like eyes were overflowing with emotion, bursting with rage. "Do you know you nearly died from the burning fever? If I had not remained here to watch over you the whole time, you think your fever would have subsided? Have you forgotten the time when you accidentally cut your hand and ended up filling up the entire house with blood? And you can tell me that it's just a fever now? Do you know that just a fever can kill you?" It could be seen just how angry he was, as his good-looking face was flushed a rageful red. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Lu Junyao then sighed rather helplessly as he looked at the man who had gone on such a long rant in one breath, and he then asked in a highly concerned voice, "Are you thirsty?" "What?" Bai Jiyan was baffled. He was talking about something so serious. What does it have anything to do with being thirsty? Lu Junyao then explained, "I was afraid that you might be tired having said so much, and thought that you might want to have a drink before you continue." Bai Jiyan was at a complete loss for words. He wanted to just vomit out blood and die so much. Chapter 114. 1. Scheming beast, this fella is never once serious. He can go so far off track, even with such a serious topic. How tiring. It's really a subordinate's sorrow to serve a lord like this. Criticizing silently in his heart for a while, Bai Jiyan suddenly recalled about the news he had received from a few days back and said, "I heard from the guys that they saw people from the Divine Temple hanging around close to the dark regions. They did not do anything, but seemed to be searching for something." Searching? Lu Junyao raised an eyebrow. That bunch of people have always proclaimed that they are closest to the gods and portray themselves to be holy saints, never wanting to have any dealings with an evil force like us all this time. For them to come into the territories within the dark regions, aren't they afraid that they'll be tainted by the evil air and suffer punishment from God? Bai Jiyan was amused by those words and went on to say, "You don't need to emphasize such a clear line between our relationship with them. Who in cloud heaven does not know that the revered holy temple lord of the bright moon temple, who is as beautiful as a celestial goddess, has admired the dark lord for many years? Heh. A pity the flower petals fall upon an indifferent stream." That was clearly an attempt to make fun of him. Lu Junyao cast a sideways glance over at him and said in a lazy tone, "Admiration? She probably wants to suck out my essence for her cultivation. That woman is a serpent under that beauty, and you don't even know that. Come on, there's no need to be so harsh with your words. It is also advantageous to you, isn't it? She's a dual cultivator. Not only will it enhance the harmony of yin and yang, it will also consolidate and elevate your cultivation, It's really the best of both worlds. Moreover, the other party is so beautiful looking and her heart is absolutely loyal to you, why not? You just grant people their wish. Bai Ziyan laughed, his expression on his face looking highly dirty as he cajoled and teased. Lu Junyao snorted derisively and said, "Since you like her so much, I'll send someone to go to the divine temple to make a marriage proposal, so that you do not need to constantly be eaten up by jealousy and indulge in wishful thinking." He is indulging in wishful thinking? He is being eaten up by jealousy? He is just cracking a joke here, you know? To think this fella could be so vicious that the man could even dream up a comeback as insidious as offering him up to them in marriage. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU as expected. Even though the man had been wrecked by fever for an entire day and night, and his body was still in a weakened state, Bai Ziyan was still unable to win that fella in a battle of words like before. When the misty fog dispersed, upon the beautiful and stunning countenance of the lady dressed in fiery red, a vague hint of a gentle smile could be seen upon the faint curl at the edges of her lips. The slim and seductive figure was seated upon a swing, rocking back and forth lightly as countless pink flower petals fell from the trees above, onto her hair, her body. The long luscious eyelashes were half lowered, and a multicolor striped butterfly seemed so attracted to the beauty that it landed audaciously on those lashes, reluctant to leave. The ticklish feeling from her lashes caused the lady to let out a light laugh, sounding like the tinkle of silver bells, pleasing and melodious that was carefree and joyous to hear. Chapter 114. 2. Scheming beast. She slowly raised up a hand, and her sleeve slid down slightly to reveal a fair and smooth wrist, her beautiful veins against her white skin like lustrous jade under the sunlight, glaringly fair. The butterfly on her lashes fluttered its wings, and obediently flew onto her finger, not moving thereafter. That scene was so beautiful it took a person's breath away, unable to help themselves, but lament how could such an amazing person in the world. If a youth were to catch even a glimpse of this, it might come to hinder him his entire life. The lightly rocking swing suddenly stopped, and a pair of long arms stretched out to wrap the lady's slender body tightly in an embrace. A muscular figure appeared, sticking so close to the lady that there wasn't any bit of a gap between them. "Ah, look what you did. You scared away my butterfly," the lady said in mild anger, her voice exceptionally gentle and enchanting. Her beautiful frail jade-like hand was held in the person's grip, their fingers interlocked, which was what scared off the butterfly that coveted the aura the lady exuded. "Who asked my fey heir to be just too beautiful for words? You make me can't help myself, but want to come close the moment I see you." As the man whispered those sweet words, the warmth of his breath tickled the lady's neck, numbingly ticklish. The man's actions teased the lady till she could not help but squirm her body away. She had just turned her head, and was about to admonish him, wanting him to keep away from her a little, but was suddenly kissed out of the blue. The man's burning lips and tongue invaded into her world in an instant, dominating and unyielding. The lady's beautiful face could not help but redden. Although shy, she did not reject him, her two slender arms curling up around the man's neck, and her lips parting slightly, allowing the man to overwhelm her forcefully, his very being enveloping her entirely, which wouldn't dissipate for a long while. It was some moments before it stopped, the man holding her by her waist, smiling at her who was panting slightly in his arms, looking highly drained, and he could not help but say teasingly, "It has been such a long time already, so why are you still helpless like this? If I am to do anything further to you, wouldn't you be overexhausted?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Those words that were heavily laden with meaning made the lady highly embarrassed, and tracing a small crescent with her finger, she squeezed out a few words haltingly from her mouth. "You're such a thug." Hearing that, the man let out a soft laugh, and he rested his forehead against hers before he said softly, "Call me a thug again, and I'll make that accusation come true, and show you what a real thug will do." "You." The lady's eyes grew wide, looking like she was filled with indignant rage. Before she could even finish her sentence, the man leaned in and kissed her, and his low sexy voice then sounded right beside her ear. "Don't look at me like that. Fei Air, you know it very well. I have never been able to resist you all along, I will not be able to hold back. Chapter 114. 3. Scheming beast. She leaned her tiny reddened face upon his shoulder, her pearly shell-like teeth biting her lip as bashfulness filled her heart, but feeling indescribably sweet at the same time. But in the very next second, the tiny face suddenly looked like it exploded, turning a bright red crimson. For no other reason, but because the man's great hand had led her small hand to slowly move to a spot that was not be described, which threw her into such a panic she wanted to scream out and flee. But the man's voice sounded innocent and aggrieved. You are to blame, making it so torturous for me every time, causing me so much anguish. Let me go. Her face was so red it seemed like blood would drip out from it. Her voice so soft it was like a mosquito. No, just leave it there like this. Just for a while. The man said thuggishly. How can you be so? Me? What? Despicable. Oh, despicable? The man's handsome-looking face suddenly showed a naughty smile. Like this. Eek. Go away. The lady's voice was embarrassed almost to death, which startled the birds in the woods. Qingyu woke up with a smile. She did not know why she would have such a sweet and happy dream. Those two people in the dream were so blissful that it was enviable. Fei Air, that was her mother's birth name. That woman was most probably her mother when she was younger. And that man was her father? She supposed it should be. Yen Su had said before that her mother was a seemingly gentle woman who kept everyone else at arm's length. To be able to make her show such a joyous smile that came right out from her heart must be because of the man she loved so dearly and deeply. The one and only man she had ever loved. All in all, it was a good dream. She thought that the day would come that she would not just see them through her dreams, but to meet them face to face. The sun had already risen outside, and it could be seen just how long she had been dreaming. She got up out of bed and had just changed her clothes when she suddenly heard a commotion just outside her door. Qing Bei's suppressed voice then sounded. The two of you had better stop for a while. My elder sis probably slept late last night and still has not awoken. Wait till she sees the two of you fighting again. She would definitely get angry. Meatball did not start the fight. It's this ugly thing here that is bullying and ostracizing Meatball. The little beast's voice was indignant and aggrieved. Croak. You are the ugly one. Your whole family's ugly. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Little Snow was so angry it wanted to strike that little beast. Bullying a toad because I can't talk? You dare to insult me looks? Even Mistress has praised how beautiful I look. You ugly thing. How dare you scold my mother? I will not let you get away with that. Meatball was enraged. It only has mother as its only kin, so its whole family consists of only itself and mother. You can scold the little beast itself, but the little beast will not tolerate anyone scolding its mother. Chapter 114. For scheming beast. Croak croak. It's you I am scolding and not Mistress. Meatball is mother's baby, and you scolded Meatball's whole family, which means you're scolding mother. The little beast's blue eyes had turned red, a strange dark surge rising up from deep within its eyes. It was just about to lash out with an attack, when a lazy-sounding voice reached them. What happened? The moment that voice sounded, Little Snow immediately hopped over, its face accusatory. Croak croak croak. Mistress, mistress, it's that little thing there. It snatched this toad's candy beans and ate them. Hurry up and throw it out of here. Qingyu raised an eyebrow and she turned her gaze over, only to see the coal-black little ball's back facing her, its short little tail drooping limply, as its ears hung sadly down the sides of its head, looking forlorn and lonely. Meatball. Qingyu called out, feeling a little puzzled. This fella had always come bounding over, without needing to call out to it. And what was it doing there looking so sad this early morning? Qingyu took a step forward, and scooped it up into her arms. The little thing continued to hang its head low, and did not move. She reached her hand out to shift that tiny creature till it faced her, and lifted that tiny little head. She then saw that adorable little face showing such a sorrowful expression, and its large blue eyes brimming over with tears about to spill out. but the tiny one was fighting to hold it in. The moment the little creature saw her, those tears fell like rain, pitter-patter onto her hands and wetting her palm, the tiny body shivering hard. Qingyu had brought the tiny beast back, because it had been just too lovable, and seeing it cry now just broke her heart to pieces. She quickly patted its back like she was soothing a little child, her voice gentle and comforting as she cooed. "My little precious, what's wrong now? Why are you crying so bitterly? You're breaking Mother's heart into pieces like this. Stop crying now and tell Mother, which bad egg bullied you." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You seeing such a gentle side of the young lady. Even Qing Bei's eyes flared within disbelief, suddenly subconsciously becoming jealous of that tiny little beast. His sister had never ever been that gentle with him before. How unfair. And little Snow knew that it was in great trouble when it saw that. That beast is really just too scheming. To think that it knows to play soft to gain sympathy. That imp made itself look so pitiful just to win mistress' sympathy. It was being so unbelievably arrogant and audacious just a moment before. Almost wanting to scratch my face off just now. On this side, Meatball had had enough of crying, which pained its mother's heart good and proper before it said sobbingly, "Meatball. Hoo-hoo. Meatball just wanted to eat those sweet things." But the toad said, "Wah." It said Mother is his. So those sweet things are his. And the toad asked Meatball to get lost, saying Mother will no longer love Meatball one day. Chapter 115. 1. Doesn't hurt when there's no competition. Once those words came out, Qingyu immediately understood that the incident was caused by that fellow Little Snow's jealousy and wanting to get ahead. Qingyu's eyes darkened, and her gaze were sharp as knives as they swiveled onto a tiny figure that was thinking of secretly slipping away. She stretched 2 fingers out and picked up the toad, bringing it up right before her eyes. The phoenix-like eyes narrowed slightly, her voice threatening. "Are you beginning to miss the taste of double-boiled snow toad with rock sugar? Little Snow shivered subconsciously, its eyes filled with undisguised fear. It could still remember back when it had once secretly gobbled up elixirs that the mistress had spent an entire night cultivating, which threw Qingyu into such a great fit of anger. In order to teach Little Snow a lesson it would remember deeply, she had actually put the little beast into a pot and double-boiled it. She had added rock sugar and a big mess of various herbs, double-boiling it for more than a good half of the day, which almost cooked the poor little beast. Fortunately, it was quite a mature snow toad, and its thick hide and tough flesh prevented it from suffering much harm. But the feeling of slowing being boiled was really tormenting, and the taste of all those strange herbs mixed with rock sugar tasted really bad. Upon hearing that it was in danger of being double-boiled once again, Little Snow quickly shook its head violently and put on the most pitiful look it could when its survival instincts kicked in. Its short feet that had been kicking as it struggled now not moving at all, looking pathetic like it had been gravely hurt and highly aggrieved. Qingyu snorted coldly and said, "The next time I see you bully Meatball again, just because you've spent a longer period of time with me, I will peel that beautiful skin off your back." "No." Little Snow rushed to nod its head, not daring to raise any objection. What kind of a joke is that? Rather than peel off its skin, it would rather it be thrown into the boiler. Its beautiful skin was the thing it was most proud of. But it had inadvertently come to see a particular obedient-looking beast crouched right beside Qingyu, a little black ball of coal with eyes looking so sly and filled with glee, not avoiding its gaze when their eyes met, and even shaking its tiny tail in a show of triumphant victory. Croak, croak, croak. That scheming beast. You think you're that great just because you're adorable. Mistress, look at that little beast. Do not be deceived by its pitiful act. Faint Mist Sect. The quarterly internal trials were about to begin, and slightly more than a month after the trials would be the recruitment of new disciples. This time, the various elders and teachers in the Faint Mist Sect were seemingly highly eager, seeking to compete with each other. In the Faint Mist Sect's top 100 ranking, except for the time that Suli Mo achieved the unprecedented 300 consecutive wins, there hadn't been much changes in the positions. No one could beat that legendary winning streak, and the only constant changes in positions were in the lower ranks, with just 1 or 2 movements in the higher ranks. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU that had caused much displeasure among many of the teachers, as many of those people who managed to get into the top 100 ranks began to get conceited, feeling rather pleased with themselves. They did not think of moving further up the ranks, but just sought to keep their current positions, not having the slightest ambition nor sense of crisis, never once thinking to take on the outstanding elite disciples among the top 20, and were content with the current situation. They would turn to become the faint mist sex parasites sooner or later like this, and bring about the collapse of the faint mist sex level bit by bit. They greatly anticipated the injection of new blood in this upcoming round of recruitment, which would replace many of those parasites among the rankings. And it was heard that there were quite a number of outstanding young shoots among the people taking part in the 3 great sex recruitment competition, who would not pale in comparison with the top 20 after some careful nurturing. They also had to be careful that those outstanding shoots were not snatched up by those guys from the Limitless Sect and the Carefree Valley. Chapter 115. 2. Doesn't hurt when there's no competition at that moment. A sweat-inducing battle had just ended in the training hall, and it was break time for everyone. A group of people were crowded together, discussing the latest news they had just received. Hey, did all of you hear? It is said that for this current trials, except for Su Liemo, none of the others among the top 5 will show up. Someone came in close to say in a conspiratorial tone. Why? The internal trials is the day that fresh new blood might be injected into the faint mist sect, and great changes might occur in the rankings. How can they not come? Another person asked, seemingly feeling displeased with the top-ranking guys. Haha, the moment I hear you say that, I know that you are one of those who are so engrossed only in cultivation, and do not pay any attention to the events happening in the world outside. The person mocked with a laugh, acting like he knew some inside information, making everyone around him prick up their ears curiously. Although the people among the faint mist sect's top 100 ranks have changed again and again through the times, but the top 5 positions have never once moved before. I heard that the few of them are extremely close to each other, close as brothers. The reason why they had not challenged each other before is because they do not care about the ranking at all. Moreover, not to mention the other 4, just the monstrous Su Liemo, who set the record of 300 consecutive wins, is already someone that no one without some real capabilities is able to challenge. After that person said that, his face then showed a strange expression, and he continued to say in a low whisper, I have been in the faint mist sect for quite a good number of years already, but even I have not seen those few guys before. They are all highly mysterious entities. Isn't it said that Su Liemo will show himself this time? We'll be able to see one of them at least. That's right. The skilled expert who set the record of 300 consecutive wins. I would really like to have a gander what kind of a person he is like. He might be rather old. They were still huddled together in discussion when the sound of a clear and unrestrained laughter rang out from outside, and 2 men dressed in white brocade robes with cloud pattern embroidery came in. The man on the left was taller and more muscular, with a healthy wheat-colored complexion, his brows handsome but gentle-looking at the same time, his entire body exuding an enchanting charm. The man on the right was slightly slimmer, but still possessed a well-built stature. His facial features were gentle and elegant, the corners of his lips tinged with a faint smile, the image of a refined gentleman. But there was a slight sense of disaffection exuding from him, his air and demeanor lofty, noble and elegant. The cloud-patterned embroidered uniforms were already eye-catching by themselves, and with the added outstanding looks of those 2 people, they had naturally captured everyone's attention. It's Lian Xiaojia and Xianyuan Che. Besides the mysterious and elusive few people among the top 5 ranks who seldom appeared before people and few anything new about them, all the others were more or less recognizable by people among them. Lian Xiaojia was the eldest son of the Martial Kingdom's right-wing general, his identity noble and a righteous individual. So even if you do not look at his identity, just his personality alone would win him quite a number of friends. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Xianyuan Che was the Green Wave Kingdom's crown prince who possessed a higher and even more noble identity. Just his handsome-looking face alone was enough to get many of his female senior fellow disciples drooling, but unfortunately for them, the Faint Mist sect's internal rules and regulations were very strict, so even if they secretly harbored intentions, they did not dare do anything about that, as it was no small matter if they were to be thrown out of the sect. Many of the ladies had not completely given up even when he was engaged in marriage before. Hence now that his engaged was called off, and he was now a free man, the number of women eyeing him covetously had greatly increased. There were many instances for a chance encounter, or to brush shoulders fleetingly with him. But a pity His Highness the Crown Prince was straight-laced, and not one who liked to womanize, not giving any one of them a single chance. Lian Xiaojie was ranked 10th on the top 100 chart, and Xianyuan Che was 7th. These two highly powerful men who also possessed such great looks would naturally have many people seeking to win their favor. Wherever they went, and countless young ladies will look at them bashfully, unable to hide the admiration in their eyes. Chapter 115. 3. Doesn't hurt when there's no competition. Lian Xiaojie sighed when he saw that, and said with a teasing glance to the man beside him, "Every time I am with you, I start to doubt my life." Huh? Xianyuan Che turned to him, slightly confused. Why? Lian Xiaojie looked at his befuddled look, and clenched his teeth tight. Before I knew you, I have always thought that I have a prestigious and illustrious family background, am really rather good-looking, and possess great skills. But compared to you, my family background pales in comparison, skills not as good as you, and am not as popular with the ladies as you are. How can I possibly not start to doubt the meaning of my life? Xianyuan Che was taken aback hearing those words, and he then curled up his lips in a smile as he said, "Things like family background is fated, but your destiny in the grasp of your own hands, and is decided by what you do." You're right. Lian Xiaojie nodded in agreement, and then looked at the man's gentle and expressionless handsome-looking face. Feeling a little rueful, he shook his head and said, "I have always greatly admired you, which makes me wonder why that greatest beauty of an ex-fiancé of yours could make such a hasty decision. Could there possibly be a more outstanding husband than you for her to choose from?" Their relationship in the sect had always been rather good, and they were also staying in the same courtyard, so he would naturally know about the matter. He had seen that greatest beauty, and though she was really very beautiful, but she seemed too cold, hardly approachable, truly a case of to be admired from afar. Or they might be hurt from the freezing chill if anyone got too close. He just could not understand how a young lady just in her prime teen years could be so cold and distant. What kind of a man could possibly like her? So when he heard that Xianyuan Che had called off the engagement when he came back, he had been happy for the guy, thinking that Xianyuan Che must have taken the initiative to annul the engagement, because he could no longer stand that person's icy cold personality. At least he was now freed from that sea of torment, and would be able to look for a gentle and demure partner anew. But he was still a little worried. This brother-in-arms of his seems completely fine on the surface, but he might be suppressing it all deep down inside. So appropriate counsel and persuasion from him was still sorely needed. Hearing that, Xianyuan Che went on to respond, "There's always someone better than you and a heaven higher than the one you see. There are so many people more outstanding and stronger than me, and since she has a better choice, why should I persist to latch on and not let go? Might as well just agree to it and be done with it." Although he meant exactly what he said with no underlying meaning, but the audience had other thoughts about that. Lian Xiaojie heard a sad tinge of self-ridicule from those words, and felt that Xianyuan Che's heart must be filled with despair and disappointment. He was just about to offer some comforting words, when he suddenly saw a puff of purple smoke bomb appear in the air a far distance away with a boom. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Everyone was a little startled for a moment, and before they knew what was happening, they heard the sound of hurried footsteps and stern voices calling out. Quickly, someone touched the barrier at the entrance, and is attempting to break through. Hurry up and go provide support. The entrance into the Faint Mist sect was infamously well hidden and difficult to find, and one wouldn't know where to start looking for it without anyone leading the way. And the first rule in the Faint Mist sect was that no one must ever reveal the sect's location to anyone, not even to their closest kin. If anyone was found to have revealed the location of the entrance and caused the sect to fall into a crisis, they would not escape the sect's persecution, even if they escaped to the ends of the earth. But right before their eyes, someone was attempting to break through the barrier at the entrance. Could it be someone leaked the secret? Could there possibly be a traitor within the sect that was sent here by another power outside? Chapter 116. 1. The Crimson Land's 8 demons. As everyone's emotions surged and rose, inside the Faint Mist sect that was hidden within layers of rolling peaks, at the bottom of an immense raging waterfall, the torrential waters were stained red with blood. It must be known that the flow of this wide waterfall was unbelievably rapid and powerful, where even a fully grown man weighing several hundred pounds would be immediately washed away. To stain these waters red over such a large area, it could well be imagined how much blood would be needed to achieve that. Although the entrance was behind the waterfall, it hid another world inside. But even if someone came to this spot, they would still not be able to go inside. There were several tens of significantly skilled disciples guarding the entrance, and nothing untoward had happened for the past many decades, as no one had been daring enough to come find trouble with the Faint Mist sect, so they had not kept their guard up. But unexpectedly, someone had come attacked them on this day. At that moment, a good half of those many tens of disciples were dead, the many years of lazy and idyllic life causing their defense capabilities to have slackened greatly from those times in the past. TSK. So this is what the level of the leading sect among the fabled 3 great sects is like. Just a bunch of utter rubbish. The voice was extremely arrogant, and looking over, 7 or 8 figures in scarlet battle robes were seen. They looked to be merely about 20 to 30 years of age, and their faces were tattooed with patterns of various types of ferocious beasts. Their group of people had some notoriety in the pugilist world, not belonging to any sect or clan, but were feared by many. Those things on their faces were not drawn on for fun, but they were born with them. It was said that they could control those types of spirit beasts in battle, possessing strange talents, and were prone to slaughter, bringing disaster everywhere they went. Never had it been thought that they would make their way here to the Faint Mist sect. I heard that the Faint Mist sect holds quite a lot of rare and precious treasure, and many high-grade martial arts skill manuals. If we are able to take out some of those, it would surely be quite a haul. The man with the scorpion tattoo on his face said sinisterly as greed flashed across his face. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. I am more interested in the little beauties they have inside. It is said that the Faint Mist sect's girl disciples are all great-looking, and every single one of them are still untainted virgins. Another man with an anaconda tattoo on his face said lecherously, he was born living among snakes, and he had inadvertently come to assume a snake's traits, seeming to prefer darkness and having strong desires. There were only 4 left among the disciples guarding the entrance, who were still breathing at that moment, and when they heard those despicable and vulgar words from the man, anger immediately rose up in their hearts. The more rash one among them then could not help but mutter indignantly, utterly despicable and shameless. The smile immediately faded from the man's face, and his jet-black eyes turned to fix onto the disciple who spoke, his voice so calm with absolutely no emotion. Say that again? The disciple guarding the door looked up at him subconsciously, and found that the man's eyes were extremely strange. The irises of his eyes were vertical slits like those of a snake's, and just as shock ran through him, he suddenly let out an agonizing cry. He raised his hands up over his eyes, as bright red blood flowed out between his fingers. Chapter 116. 2. The Crimson Land's 8 demons. It was until his hands fell limply down that the others saw that 2 tiny snakes had just come out from inside his eyes, tearing the eyeballs out from their sockets. Mere moments later, from his nostrils, ears, and even his mouth, several tiny snakes came crawling out, and his body suddenly expanded like a balloon being pumped up, before exploding with a bang when the body reached its limits with blood and gory flesh splattering in all directions. In the remaining puddle of flesh and blood, a pile of snakes writhed and slithered. The 3 other remaining disciples immediately retched and vomited. The scene was just too nauseating and terrifying at the same time. That man was just strangely frightening. He had clearly not done anything, but just asked a question in an indifferent voice, while giving their fellow disciple an expressionless glance. And such an unfathomable thing had happened in the next instant. Seeing the other few disciples guarding the entrance shaking like leaves in the wind, the snake tattoo guy burst out laughing, and then walked over closer to them with an indiscernible smile, his face seemingly rather agreeable. "Why not we do this? You open up the entrance, and I'll spare you your lives. How's that?" He put on such a highly amiable demeanor, as if he wasn't responsible for the brutal way their fellow disciple had just been killed at all. And even when he said that he would spare them their lives, who knew whether he was telling them the truth / a man with such a volatile temperament? But the faint Miss Sex rules said that if any one of them were to reveal the sex entrance, no good end would come to them. Hence, the few of them steeled their hearts, and were determined to not reveal anything even at the threat of their lives. Right at that moment, the air before them shimmered, and the 3 wounded disciples disappeared into thin air. In their place were 20 to 30 inner sect disciples dressed in the sect's white uniforms. Their powers were naturally quite a lot stronger than the disciples guarding the entrance earlier. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The person standing right at the front of the group seemed to be their leader, and when he saw the scene before him, his face darkened slightly. He then turned to face the several men in scarlet robes, and said in a rather astounded voice, "Could it be that you are the Crimson Land's 8 demons? So a sharp-eyed one has come," the snake tattoo man said mockingly with a low whistle. "But no matter how many of you come, you'll only be delivering yourselves to your deaths. Be good and open up the entrance, so my brothers here can go in to have their fun. Then nothing will happen to you. Do we really need to cross blades like this? For what?" His tone of voice was even tinged with regret, sounding like he was unwilling to strike at them and create any disharmony, which caused the several people behind him to be unable to help themselves, but burst out in raucous laughter. This fellow was the youngest among the 8 of them, but was best at shooting his mouth off without restraint, and loved to put on acts like this, the one with the smartest and wittiest mind. Chapter 116. 3. The Crimson Land's 8 demons. The leader of the disciples from the sect's inner circle knew very well that the enemy they were facing was anything but ordinary, and every single one of them too enigmatic to decipher. It would be foolhardy to clash with them head-on, and he would have to win through wits. So he immediately clasped his hand over his fist and said, "I do not think that there is any enmity between the Faint Mist sect and you gentlemen here. Moreover, all of you hail from the faraway Scarlet Lands, which is thousands of miles away from here. So why would you gentlemen come all the way here, and even kill some of our Faint Mist sect's disciples?" The easternmost Scarlet Lands. It was a highly chaotic place filled with all kinds of dangers and turmoil. It was said it was due to the abject poverty in those regions that ground and tempered their people into becoming so terrifying, where they could almost be called inhuman, but a bunch of nefarious hoodlums capable of arson, murder, robbery and abduction, every evil deed imaginable. But that did not mean that they were all just a group of simple-minded and awkward barbarians. On the contrary, some of them were extremely intelligent, and their willpower were tempered to become very strong living under such harsh conditions, acquiring extraordinary skills. People who lived in such circumstances surviving against the odds were often terrifying people, because their potential were mercilessly pushed to reach very powerful extremes. Their fighting prowess were not what people who went through the normal paths of cultivation could compare to. And what the easternmost lands were best known for was not the lawlessness of the region, nor was it the barren lands where nothing grew, but the infamous and notorious Crimson Land's 8 demons. It was said that these people were not normal humans, but men who were half-beast, born from unions between man and beast. Hence not only did they possess human intelligence, They also had the powerful strength of beasts, their reaction time lightning quick, and well equipped with survival skills in the wild, almost invincible warriors. The easternmost lands were also unique in the fact that there was an amazing type of juice from a plant. If consumed over long periods, it strengthened one's body and healed one's pains and wounds quickly. It was rumored that Crimson Land's 8 demons were fearless against sword or spear, immortal and their skin impenetrable, and the tattoos on their faces were beasts that accompanied them throughout their lives, which they were able to summon up under their orders, highly powerful and terrifying to hear. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU people who were accepted into the Faint Mist sect were no ordinary people after all. So how they not have heard of the Crimson Land's 8 demons? Hence when the fellow disciple leader spoke that name, fear rose up inside all of them reflexively. It was the Crimson Land's 8 demons, and would they be able to survive and encounter this group? Their luck today must be bloody bad. It was said that people from the easternmost lands were brutal and barbaric, but the Crimson Land's 8 demons were on another class altogether. But if those ghastly and terrifying tattoos on their faces were to be removed, their countenance would still be considered to be rather good-looking. Seeing the Faint Mist sect's disciple being so polite and respectful, it soothed the group of 8 men slightly, and the snake tattoo man opened his mouth to say an explanation. It is said that the Faint Mist sect is the most powerful force in the Constellation Lands, the leader among all sects and clans. So our group of uncouth country bumpkins thought to come expand our horizons, to see just how strong the sect is. My few brothers and I have traversed the pugilist world for a good number of years, but have never met our match. So we came to be instructed, and to learn a thing or two. Chapter 116. 4. The Crimson Land's 8 demons. Those words had naturally been spoken by the man with the snake tattoo. He had always had the gift of the gab, and when he imitated the speech of all those literary scholars, he was perfect, sounding intellectual and well-read. Hearing him proclaim himself as an uncouth country bumpkin, and was here to be instructed, he was a completely different person from his usual wild and brutal self, which was just too funny to watch, causing all his comrades looking at him to can't help but burst out laughing. This fellow was really just too mischievous. The group of Faint Mist sect disciples were speechless, and thought to themselves if they had not witnessed how cruelly and viciously he had just killed their fellow disciples, they might just believe a little of his words. But looking at the situation now, it was clear that the group of scarlet-robed men were here to challenge them. When the leading discipline heard that, his brows furrowed up slightly, and he deliberated for a while in his heart, before he clasped his hand over his fist and said, "Will you gentlemen be willing to hear me out for a moment? It will be the Faint Mist sect's internal trials in 3 days, where all of the sect's disciples will be dueling each other, in a grand meet by elimination, to determine the top 100 that would grace our charts. And since you gentlemen seeks to gain an understanding of our skills, why not come back 3 days later, where not only would you be able to watch an exciting competition, but you will also be able to issue a challenge to the more outstanding disciples among us and exchange pointers. Wouldn't that be a winning solution in more ways than one for everyone?" That disciple was really quite good with words, and he was neither imitated nor driven into a panic before such friends, but was instead clear or incisive with his words, calm and collected throughout the conversation, his steady temperament anything but ordinary. His actions had also made the Crimson Land's 8 demons look at him in a better light. Would your words carry enough weight to make such a decision? Doesn't the Faint Mist sect prohibit any outsiders from entering? The snake tattoo guy said with an imperceptible smile on his face. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. It seems that there is something your esteemed self might not be aware of. The internal trails will not be held within the sect premises, so there is no need for you to be suspicious of what I am saying. If our honored guests is willing to heed my words and come back 3 days later, I will immediately clarify it with our sect leader when I go back. The Crimson Land's 8 demons are powerful pugilists rarely seen, and I would think that the sect leader would definitely welcome all of you." The man then paused for a moment before he continued. "After all, compared to being despised by forcing your way in, Wouldn't you very much rather be received as guests in a grand fashion? I am sure you esteemed gentlemen here would very much prefer the latter choice." The Crimson Land's 8 demons looked at each other, and they seemed to agree with his words silently. "You are quite a bold one, I must say. In that case, my brothers and I here will believe you this time. You go back to tell your sect leader everything said here today clearly, and we will come back as your guests 3 days later." The snake tattoo guy said with smiling eyes, and then disappeared from the spot he was standing in together with the others. All the other disciples wiped off the sheen on cold sweat on their foreheads. Fortunately for them, the danger had passed. "Senior, we're so lucky to have you here. Otherwise we might not be able to leave this place with our lives today." Chapter 117. 1. Call of a fragmented spirit. In contrast to everyone else who collectively heaved sighs of relief, the brows of the leader of the disciples were creased up, not easing in the slightest. The trials of all the sects were always held internally, and they had never once had any outsiders taking part before. But in order to protect the lives of his fellow disciples, he had had no choice but to play it that way. The Crimson Land's 8 demons, even with just a single one among them, it would be enough to thrash them and hang them all upside down. Seeing that worried look on his face, a disciple beside him then asked him in puzzlement, "Senior, haven't you gotten all those people to leave already? What are you still so worried about? You think everything is fine just because they're gone?" The man said as he shook his head and gave a long sigh. "I don't even know why this bunch of freaks would come all the way here from such a faraway place, and every single one of them holds such great power. I fear that there would be no end to the trouble we would meet at the trials. The Faint Mist sect is the top sect in these lands, and if we are defeated by such a small group of people, how are we going to have any more standing in these lands when news of what happened spread?" His fellow disciples have clearly only considered the situation immediately in front of them, and had not thought deeper into it. The trials this time would no longer just be conducted internally among themselves, but they would all have to stand together against an outside enemy force. Seems like they would have to invite the top 5 ranks back to hold the fort this time. Night fell, and insects of unknown names chirped softly while hidden within the darkness, adding some life to the loneliness of night. Along winding and meandering walkways, and around a majestic pavilion dwelling, the tinkle from ripples over the water sounded as the night breeze brushed over its surface. Flowers of nameless species blossomed silently, extending their petals as they presented their radiance and beauty. "Help me. I am in agony." It seemed to be a woman's weak cry, made with just a faint sliver of breath as the voice struggled painfully. Lu Junyao had just fallen asleep for a short while when he suddenly heard this cry. He slowly opened his eyes, his gaze crystal clear. Where had this voice come from? It seemed like it was from a place very far away, and that was why when it reached his ears, it sounded so weak and faint, almost inaudible. Could he be dreaming? No. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. He calmed his heart and closed his eyes, listening carefully in silence. But he did not hear that voice anymore. It was only when he thought that he must have imagined it all, and was about to give up when he suddenly heard it again. "I am in agony. Help me. June Air. Help me." Lu Junyao's gaze froze, and he sat up in his bed in an instant. That voice was calling out to him. Who is that? Chapter 117. 2. Call of a fragmented spirit. He had lost both his parents from young, and he had started planning for revenge for as long as he could remember. He then came to establish the Dark Legion, fearfully respected by everyone, with all of them addressing him as the eminent Dark Lord. No one in the Dark Legion, with the exception of Bai Jiyan who was on closer terms to him as they grew up together, would dare to address him by name directly, much less call out to him in such an affectionate manner. If that was not his mother, then it could only be this one other person, the kind and gentle woman with superb intelligence, and treated him like he was her own child. The woman who had held him warmly in a warm embrace when his mind had very nearly fallen into devilry, right after he washed the entire family of his enemy in a bloodbath. There was no fear or disgust in her eyes, but just heavy stricken pain she felt for him. That was the only glimmer of warmth in the ruthless and cold-blooded world he lived in. But had perished prematurely, her soul scattered and dispersed many years before. He had been traversing between the few realms for so many years, all for the sake of gathering her fragmented soul scattered all over the place, and to revive her. Just now, that must be her voice calling out to him. Lu Junyao lowered his eyes. The sleepiness seeped out from him completely. To think that this low-level continent would come to contain remaining traces of her dispersed soul. She must have come here before while she was still alive. Since he did not feel sleepy at all, he would naturally not let the others enjoy peace. With absolutely no concern that people needed to sleep and rest right in the middle of the night, he got the others to wake up from their dreams. It wasn't all that bad for Bai Jiyan, who merely let out a great big yawn and looked a little tired, but was a lot more awake after a while. But for the gray-robed man, who was soundly asleep 20 hours out of 24 in a day, even though he was awoken from his sleep, his eyes had not opened at all. His body was seated upright, but his head was like a little chick pecking at grains, nodding incessantly, until he accidentally hit his chin onto the table, before he came fully awake from shock. What is it? What is it? What happened? Did an assassin sneak in? The gray-robed man was suddenly peering warily all around. Bai Jiyan rubbed his handsome-looking face and said in a lazy voice, "If there really is an assassin, you would have died more than 100 times already. Then what is it that is so important?" The gray-robed man asked with a serious look on his face. "My lord, just give me your orders if there is anything you need." Lu Junyao's devilishly mesmerizing violet eyes deepened. "With this matter, no one but you will be able to do it. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World." EU suddenly entrusted with such heavy responsibility, the gray-robed man was feeling overwhelmed by the attention bestowed upon him. Since the day he had come to serve the Lord by his side, he had always felt that he had not been of much use to the Lord, and the only mission he had been entrusted with was only to go protect a little lass, which demoralized him greatly. This time, seeing the Lord looking at him with such a grave expression, he immediately perked himself up good and proper. "I want you to look for traces of a scattered soul in the constellation lands. You are born with a pair of yin-yang eyes that can see spirits of the netherworld, and also possess powerful senses that are able to detect their presence. So this should not be too difficult a task for you," Lu Junyao said slowly. Chapter 117. 3. Call of a fragmented spirit. Hearing him say those words, the gray-robed man was stunned for a moment. Fragmented soul? Although he did not know the reason why the Lord wanted him to seek out a fragmented soul, but he still went ahead to ask very seriously, "This fragmented soul, is it a living person or is he dead?" Lu Junyao's eyes narrowed slightly as he replied softly, "She passed away several decades ago." The gray-robed man was surprised. So many years ago? Then it would really be rather hard to find. It must be known that when one's soul departs from their flesh shell, and they did not go where they were supposed to go, their spirit body would become weaker the longer they remained in the mortal world. For a person who has been dead for decades, her spirit soul still has not disappeared? That was just incredible. The expression on Bai Jiyan's face could not be determined, and he then suddenly seemed to recall something. Lu Junyao gazed into the dark night sky, and the woman's voice seemed to still reverberate in his ears. "I can feel that her fragmented soul isn't too far away from the gathered cloud loft. That would greatly diminish the scope to be within the green wave country." The gray-robed man nodded and then stood up. Compared to his usual sleepy and indolent self, he was full of life and vigor at that moment, his eyes alight as he said, "I will go look for it right now. My lord, tell me if there are any distinctive features about that fragmented soul. And it is a woman? She was from cloud heaven, and her soul was scattered and dispersed because of an accident. Fragments of her soul scattered over into several realms, and I have been searching for traces of her fragmented soul for many years, but to no avail. But just a quarter of an hour before, I sensed her presence, and she was calling out to me for help." "That mystifying?" the gray-robed man asked in surprise. At that moment, Bai Jiyan suddenly spoke up softly. This broken soul you are searching for. Could it possibly be Aunt Lan? Having known Lu Junyao for so long, he had naturally known that this fella had an elder he greatly respected, one of the rare few people he cared about. For this man who always just did as he pleased, towards this Aunt Lan, would however listen to what she said a little. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. A pity great beauties suffer unfortunate fates, and she passed away at the prime of her life. Yes, it's her. Lu Junyao's voice deepened, his mood seemingly somber. Although he had never given up on searching for any traces of her. But it had been so many years, and he had not thought of that person so deeply for a long time. But in that moment when his mind was not entirely clear earlier, he had gotten a brief glimpse of that unforgettable past. The countenance of that once blooming beauty now haggard-looking, the expression on her face one of sorrow and despair. He could not even begin to imagine what kind of pain and torment she must have suffered that could cause such a proud and strong-willed woman to be so defeated and to look so weak and frail. Chapter 117. 4. Call of a fragmented spirit. That was something that Lu Junyao was not able to accept. What he saw in Aunt Lan was warmth and light that he looked up to, and unyielding pride that many people could not even begin to compare to, one who would rather break than bend to the will of others. Hence, no matter what it takes, he would need to save that woman from the torment she was trapped in. This was something that even Bai Jiyan, whom he was closest to, knew little about. He only knew that there was a forbidden place within the dark regions that had existed for many years. That was a place that no one other than the eminent Dark Lord himself could step into, so heavily guarded by soldiers that not even a fly was able to get in. Although Lu Junyao kept himself idle and leisurely most of the time by delegating everything to his subordinates, but he would make a trip to the forbidden place himself every once in a while, remaining in there for several hours at a time. It was so mysterious that many of them really almost could not resist wanting to go in there, to see what was the secret hidden inside so carefully. But the cad Lu Junyao had not only put the entrance into the forbidden place under heavy guard, he had even placed an unbelievably malevolent super-divine beast to further enhance the security, who must have received strict orders to kill any intruder on sight. If it were to let any intruder sneak in, even if it was a precious priceless super-divine beast, that demon lord would slaughter the beast without even blinking. That had always been the way he handled things, where any who defied him would meet their deaths, mercilessly brutal. Hence back in the Dark Legion, none of those top-grade super-divine beasts were frightening. What terrified them the most was their eminent Dark Lord, a person who could be smiling amicably at you one moment, and suddenly just shred anyone who displeased him to pieces the very next second. A terrifying thought suddenly came into Bai Jiyan's mind. The forbidden place in the dark regions. Could it be hiding a person in there? The sky had just turned bright, and the young lady seated cross-legged on the bed slowly opened her eyes as she expelled a long breath. Within those lovely long upslanted eyes, a golden red sliver flashed fleetingly inside, which added a devilish flair to them. The exquisitely beautiful countenance seemed to become more alluring the moment those eyes opened. That could just hook a person's soul away completely. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU at one glance, one might think that she was some demoness cultivating some kind of demonic skill. Mistress, congratulations! You have broken through to the 7th measure in the burial soul arts. The golden-haired youth's clear and enchanting voice sounded slowly, filled with smiles and gratification. Looks like my awakening has been of some help to Mistress. To think that Mistress has jumped up 2 measures in less than a year's time, when it took you a good 6 years, just to attain the 5th measure in the beginning. Because when one's weapon spirit was severely injured, it would affect their host greatly as well, as every time the host achieves a breakthrough, or absorbs external powers, half of it would go to the weapon spirit. Xingyu stretched out her fair-skinned palm, and she could feel the vigorous power coursing through. Although she had reached right up to the 8th measure in her previous life at her peak, she had not experienced such an intense change. Chapter 118. 1. Following the crowd towards this amazing phenomenon, Qingyu merely credited it to the fact that the spirit energy in this other world was more robust, and cultivation in here yielded better results. She was engrossed in her thoughts when a knocking sounded upon the door, before the careful voice of a youth rang out. "Sis, are you awake?" Qingyu walked over to the door to open it, and saw a youth in a royal blue brocade robe, with a handsome and exquisite countenance, standing tall and straight outside. He was clearly still a bit shorter than Qingyu barely half a year ago, but his height had shot up now, a full head taller than she was. "What's the matter?" Qingyu asked with a smile, her eyebrow raised up. Qingbei feigned a mysterious smile, and the expression on his face was a little excited as he said, "I came here to tell you something interesting." "Huh?" "It was be the Faint Mist Sect's quarterly internal trials in a couple of days. And I heard that the location the meet will be held at will not be within the sect's premises this time. So a lot of people will be going to watch the battles. Will sis want to go watch them?" Qingbei asked with his handsome-looking eyes wide, staring at her with eager anticipation. Qingyu could not help but laugh. It's this fella himself who wants to go watch so badly. Although that was what she was thinking in her heart, her mouth could not bear to refuse him. "Since you want to go so much, then let's go. I'll be able to get a feel of the Faint Mist Sect's power beforehand as well." Qingyu replied softly, and then went on to say, "But we will have to disguise ourselves. We cannot go there like this. Not mention whether anything unexpected might occur. But if they are unlucky enough to bump into Yin Ning Luo, they would not be able to escape getting into an entangled mess." Moreover, right at this moment in the Faint Mist Sect, there was quite an explosive amount of rage within their meeting hall. "Rongyi, what great audacity! You dare to make such a promise that breaks the sect's rules that's way beyond your authority. Do you still have any respect for the sect leader?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. At this moment inside the vast meeting hall, a green-robed man upon the elevated seat was leaning back languidly against the back of his chair, a handsome smile hanging from the faintly crooked-up ends of his mouth upon that good-looking countenance, his emotions indecipherable. The 12 senior authoritative elders were seated at the side just below the man and down on the main floor. A white-robed man stood tall and straight-backed, the expression on his face calm and composed, seemingly not affected at all by the admonishment and oppression he was faced with. He then opened his mouth to respond slowly. "I do not think that I did anything wrong with the way I handled it. It was a most critical situation at that time, and this was the best thing I could think of." When the middle-aged man who had opened his mouth to berate the young man earlier saw the bold and resolute stance the young man was taking, his rage was further fueled, and he exclaimed loudly, "This is the way of a coward. How could you not even put up a fight, and immediately bow your head before those wild barbaric brutes? And to think that you're even a disciple in the sect's inner circle. You've thoroughly shamed the sect." Rongyu's face was expressionless as he looked up at the fuming middle-aged man. What Elder Jean means is that this disciple here should have fought the Crimson Land's 8 demons to the death, and pay no heed to the lives of the tens of inner circle disciples I was responsible for at that moment. Chapter 118. 2. Following the crowd. "You are just finding excuses for the weakness you showed," Elder Jean said, highly infuriated. "If that is what the elder insists on thinking, your disciple has nothing more to say to that." Rongyi responded, and he then turned his eyes to look up at the man seated high up on the elevated host seat. "Sect leader, I think the most important thing now is come up with measures to deal with the Crimson Land's 8 demons. Although the rumors about them say just how terrifying they are, some of it might be unjustly exaggerated. But I saw with my own eyes the strange and mysterious method those people employed to deal a killing strike, and our Faint Mist Sect's disciples were not able to retaliate at all. I must admit that the group of them possess some real power." The arc at the ends of the green-robed man's mouth deepened, and his voice was rich and mellow as he said, "You have always been smart, and I think you already have an idea in mind. On the surface, the purpose of this round's trials are to bring about some changes in the top 100 chart, but I'm sure everyone here knows deep down inside that it is to drive out the parasites lying hidden within the sect, where survival of the fittest would establish a healthier front that will be shown to the new recruits joining us thereafter. Hence, I feel that this is a great chance for us. Rongyi was not considered exceptionally outstanding, but his clean-cut and enduring good-looking face then showed a deep and meaningful smile. We can just use the Crimson Land's 8 demons as a gauge for our disciples, where we can then see which ones among us really hold true powers. What gall! To think that the notorious Crimson Land's 8 demons were going to be used as mere training opponents against their sect's lower disciples. If word of this leaked out, it would surely cause quite a stir. He really doesn't hold back with his words, does he? When those words came out, the various elders could not help but started debating furiously. Some marveled at his bold audacity and resolve, while some think he was just dreaming and spouting nonsense. The man up on the main seat let out a low laugh, and it was a while before he spoke. Rongyi, oh Rongyi, you really can read this sect leader's thoughts the most. I can only hope that you will not continue to withhold and hide your hand when the time comes. Your disciple will definitely do the best I can. Rongyi said with a slight bow of his head. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. In that case, I will leave this matter in your hands. The green-robed man then raised a hand, indicating that he can take his leave. Rongyi immediately retreated his way out. After he left, Elder Jean, who had opened his mouth in admonishment earlier, then creased up his brows and said in a rather disapproving tone, Sect leader, I do not understand why do you indulge Rongyi so much. He is risking the entire Faint Mist sect in a gamble this time. The real reason why he had been so furious was actually not because of the cowardice, where Rongyi had not dared to fight the enemy as mentioned earlier. It was because the opponent this time were not ordinary people. But Rongyi had acceded to such unreasonable conditions with them. What if it ends up that the Faint Mist sect's disciples were all defeated by them? He feared that it would result in them losing all face and standing across the lands. What is Elder Jean so worried about? Could you really be afraid of all those rumors? Would this greatest sect throughout the lands of ours be unable to deal with these few barbaric brutes from the easternmost edge? A white-bearded elder at the side then said, stroking his beard as he asked. Chapter 118. 3. Following the crowd hearing that, Elder Jean did not speak up in rebuttal but just said with a stern face. Elder Mo might not be aware of this, but only 3 lived among the disciples guarding the entrance on that day. One still has not regained consciousness from severe injuries, and although the other 2 did not suffer heavy injury, they have both gone mad. And how many among the people in the Faint Mist sect are kindly frail sprouts? People of mediocre abilities would not have the qualification to go in there at all, and one of the tests to gain entry was their mental and psychological mettle, were people who fail that would already be disqualified. So just how terrifying could the Crimson Land's 8 demons be, that it was able to drive 2 of their disciples holding significant powers out of their minds? Once Elder Jin's words came out, the atmosphere in the hall immediately grew repressive. All of you do not have to worry. Since I let Rongyi to take charge of this, that would mean that we have a foolproof plan for it. The man up on the main seat said, his eyes shining bright with wisdom as always. Moreover, have all of you forgotten that what the Faint Mist sect lacks the least are skilled fighters? Just that kid Suliemo, who is able to take on 100 people by himself, still holds powers we have not yet seen, not to mention the few others ranked above him. This is the first time since the Faint Mist sect has been established that we encounter people coming right up to our door to challenge us. I think it is about time we let all of them stretch and work out their bodies and meridians a bit. One more thing. The man paused for a moment and then said smilingly, Elder Jean, don't keep picking on Rongyi anymore. That kid is hiding a lot deep down inside. When he came to the Faint Mist sect 5 years ago, he immediately fought his way right up to the 21st rank and has remained entrenched in that position, not moving up or down. Haven't you ever thought that there is anything strange about that? Elder Jean was taken aback, and he thought back on the many times he thought the sect leader had overindulged Rongyi before he opened his mouth in shock. Could he be hiding his true strength? Much more than just his strength. The green-robed man's sleek long fingers rubbed at his chin, seemingly rather mournful. He told me back then that being among the top 20 is too bothersome, as the pressure is greater, and there are too many responsibilities. So he seeks only to remain at the 21st position. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. But little did he expect that the sect leader was more black-bellied than he thought. Refused to join the top 20? Alright. Then all the other inner disciples will be under your charge, where you will be responsible for them, as their senior fellow disciple, managing all their affairs, big and small included. Because the sect leader felt a little guilty, he had dumped the duty of playing big brother to all the inner disciples onto Rongyi. None of them among the top 20 were willing to take up this heavy mantle, and the hard work had fallen onto Rongyi's shoulders. So it was understandable that he allowed Rongyi a certain amount of leeway. In a blink, the day of the internal trials came. Because the location of the trials this time was outside the sect's premises, spectators were allowed. Many people made their way there in an excited rush very early, but when they came to the place, it made one feel like screaming out in a tearless cry. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.